Anna. There you go. Still muted.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Hi, I'm Anna Thompson. I'm a learning and access designer. And yes, I work with that guy.
Over somewhere. Well, welcome to our presentation. Today we're going to be talking about the secrets to accessible computer labs, and we're going to reveal them with a very clickbait title. And we thought you would all appreciate that. And I'm going to pass it over to Anna to start and kind of give you an idea of what we were doing, what our plan was, and how we built a really cool accessible computer lab at our campus.
Great, thank you. So we're going to address the following points and hope to expand them fully. But of course, you are welcome to ask any questions if anything that we share with you is not clear, or if it provokes more questions. So we want to talk about improving lab accessibility through cost-effective upgrades and describing student struggles when it comes to using university equipment or even their own, as well as how we have created interdepartmental approaches to expand lab spaces on a limited budget and use surveys and other methods to determine lab needs. Okay, so I love this picture of this old computer area. So in this day and age of BYOD, for the longest time, we thought, hey, we're not going to need labs anymore. Everyone can bring their own device, right? So there were all kinds of plans, all kinds of companies and tools and resources that came out. BYOD, yay! But we come to find out that labs are still very useful for our students, and many of them depend on them fully. And the COVID pandemic had really brought to light many, not just like food and housing insecurities, but also lack of connectivity and technology insecurities for many of our students, even our faculty and staff. So yes, labs are still important. So we do need to still invest in that type of infrastructure. And so who uses Open Computer Labs and who should fund them, right? So in our presentation, we're going to talk about our Open Learning Lab. It's the only open lab that we have on campus, and it is for our students, but we do have faculty sometimes come to use it, and we have staff members who also use it. I found EDUCAUSE published like just 2 days ago, a student experiences with technology in the pandemic report. And in it, they share a lot of great information. But interestingly enough, about 99% of students who responded, they said they had access to reliable devices. About 76%, which is about most, said that those devices were laptops. 18% they said they had desktops, and about 3% they said they primarily relied on a cell phone. And I don't know about you, but we have found that many students use their cell phone as their primary device for going to school. Another thing that they were asked is if they had particular issues with their devices and if their schoolwork was impacted. And about 3/4 of them said that they had no problems. And then a small proportion of them said they missed classes or deadlines because their device didn't work or was not equipped for a needed task. So we're not saying that every single student needs and will use a lab, but we're saying that there's a population out there that is sometimes underserved, and they depend on what we provide our campuses.
Thank you, Anna. We need to talk a little bit about computer labs. This is one of those parent-children conversations, and no, I'm just kidding. But really, computer labs are an interesting thing. At our campus, when I started a little over a decade ago, we had 3 open computer labs that any student could use. Over the past 12 years, we're down to 1. And only having 1 computer lab, you start to see a lot of the issues, especially not having general labs, we have a few that are specialized, like STEM labs and a media lab, but they're so dedicated that students across campus, whether it's nursing or STEM or education, they don't find value in the really highly dedicated machines. So one thing we wanted to do is make sure that we could keep our last lab. It's been on the chopping block a lot of times as classroom and space become an issue, less so though after COVID. And we wanted to really focus on what students needed in that lab to make it a valuable space. And you'll learn some of these things as we go through accessibility, software, and a bunch of other fun things. Anna, could you go to the next slide? Our lab right now has 18 Mac computers and 12 Windows computers. Generally, students that go in the lab use the lab on average of about 3 hours per visit. They're using programs like Adobe Photoshop and Adobe CC, which costs about $300. And for students, when they can save that money, they're going to save that money, no matter how beneficial it is for them to have it at home. They really try to save the money, especially $300 here and there can add up, especially year after year. We get about 12,000 visits a year. Our campus has about 6,000 students. And so 3,000 visits, not unique individuals, but we have students 3,000 times drop in, whether it's repeat students or unique students. It's used by every school on campus. So on our computers, we have the general software that's installed on our kiosks and our library and other places around campus. It had not been renovated in about 10 years, and I think it's existed since 1990 something, and had not gone through a major overhaul. As you can see in the picture, lines of computers, and then we had quad sets of computers near the windows and the sidewall. Unfortunately, that layout didn't help a lot of students, and people would constantly bump into each other. All right. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is bring your own device. One thing that we found, I work with the design program and the media arts programs, is that students will often cheap out on buying a laptop based on the minimum requirements. And when you're focusing on media design, it's important to have dedicated computers that have higher speed, higher RAM, higher hard drive space, so students can get their projects done quicker. Unfortunately, when you put a base requirement for students to say you need a laptop with these specifications, they often just meet those specifications. Students that switch majors often do not buy a new laptop to accommodate the major. And lastly, sometimes computers break and students need to have access. Using the software I'll talk about later, we were able to determine that students were really needing the software, really utilizing it, and we had to find ways to fund this software. Let's talk about the before times a little bit. So here's another picture of our lab, the old lab. Some computers were in groups of 4. The rest were in rows down the middle. So we had 2 long rows, and you could imagine them going side by side, and students were facing each other. You can kind of see in that picture. We tried to cram as many computers in there as we possibly could. And while maintaining ADA requirements for wheelchair access, unfortunately, we had a hard time getting students to push in their seats. And it became really difficult for students to get around the lab, as wheelchairs have a tendency to go everywhere. And go ahead, this next slide, Anna. As you can see, here's another breakdown of what our 2 rows look like. These were down the main part of the room, and on the side, you can see the quad computers. Students were facing each other. Generally, the monitors would mask, the faces of the other student, but it could be a little bit awkward. Desks, we have the up-down desk, the manual up-down desk, and unfortunately, there's these little levers, these spinny things, and they got lost years ago. So as you can see, none of our desks were parallel. It was to 10 years ago what that student wanted, and then walked away with those little spinny things. And again, we had limited movement and wheelchair access. It was enough, but it could be better. And the next slide, Anna. So we're going to show you a little bit of what we did, but not yet. One more thing. There's this little arrow, as you can all see that little arrow. Can I get a thumbs up if you see that arrow, that big red arrow? Give me a thumbs up if you said awesome red arrow there. Nobody's giving me a thumbs up. So okay, there you go. So this arrow is where our tutoring station is. And it seems a little bit strange. Why would you have an arrow? Well, our tutoring station has been in the same place for the last decade. It's always been those last two computers right at the end near the front of the room. We had posters on the wall, signs, and everything we possibly could, and even a sign above the computers. Students would walk into the room and ask where the tutors were. And so I put a sign up, and students would still walk in the room and ask where the tutors were. And then so I put an arrow up, and you'll see it in other pictures, a little dimmer arrow, and students would still ask. So we ultimately had to put this huge arrow right above the computers so students would know where the tutors were. And that showed me that there was a design issue. There were people not being able to find where the tutors were and how to access them. And if you go to the next slide, Anna. So then we wanted to get to the grand reveal, and we'll talk about how we built this lab and how we funded this lab and ways we used to determine what we put in the lab. But for now, we wanted to show you the lab. And go ahead, Anna. Here is what the lab turned into. We worked with the furniture distributor and Steelcase, and we're not promoting them. We just happen to work with them because they're our campus's choice for furniture. And we wanted to redesign the lab to be more accommodating, have more space for students with wheelchairs, have more space for group work, which is something you can't do very well in group or in big lines of computers. As you can see on the side, we have a little television, standing television, which is a touchscreen that students can display and do presentations on, plus a 4-station dual screen computer where 2 people can show PowerPoints at the same time. And then at the front of the room near the whiteboard, you'll see a little sign-in, a digital sign-in board, and then 2 tutoring stations, which would help with showing students where those tutors were. Then you go to the next one, Anna. Thank you. So here's the grand reveal. We did this in steps, and this is just one shot of it. We have multiple other shots. One thing we learned, and we'll kind of go through this as we go through the rest of the presentation, is iteration comes through mistakes, and iteration is development. It's changing things, small things, to help students make a space more accessible for them. And some things we didn't see at the beginning, and some things took a little while to get to, and I'll talk about those later. We designed for students to be inspired by what they had and what they do. That includes tables and desks that have special features. And students will show you the way if you give them free food. And one of the things that we utilize to determine how to build this space is asking students, asking them a lot, asking them what they wanted in this space, what they needed to get their classwork done, what they used for extracurricular activities. And then the next slide, Anna. And here's another view of the space. This is before the wall got painted, but you can see we have a different sign. It opened up the space incredibly when we installed these new desks. We had the same amount of computers, but we opened up these desks that are huge in area that students could use their own laptops on. They could charge their cell phone. They had computers on monitor arms that could get pushed out of the way and use the desks as a multi-purpose place for doing their work. It didn't matter if they had a computer or not. Additionally, on all of these stations, one of the main things we determined is students want power. They want lots and lots of power. And so we put power strips on the top of every desk, not 1, but 2, charge your laptop and charge your phone at the same time. And there's a better picture and I'll point it out to you. But here's a breakdown of what the lab looked after. Go ahead, Anna. All right, and here's our tutoring station. First, we had them against the wall, but as you can see, we chose to have 3-person tutoring stations, 1 standing and 1 sitting. The sitting one is great because students will need media support in groups. It's not just one student coming to a tutor saying, hey, I need help all the time. It's usually multiple students asking for help. We decided to purchase the best computers we possibly could for these stations, so the tutors could work with drop-ins as fast as possible and get media rendered. And so we really went above and beyond with those tutoring stations to make sure that they were accommodating to the tutoring that was going on. Additionally, every computer in that space we opened up to students. So if students wanted to, after the tutoring hours, they could go in and use those computers. Additionally, oh, go back. There you go. Additionally, we also wanted to put a standing desk for students. We have a stool in there now, which is not pictured, but it helps students come in and ask the tutors questions, whether they need help getting their hard drive set up or media support on a different computer. Having students walk in and see somebody standing there is a super awesome greeting to them, and they feel like, oh, there is somebody there to help me. All right, next one. Here's a better look at what the computers look like. You can see right here on the side of the computer desk, there's a little power strip. And then all the computers are Mac computers on one side of the room. And then we have Windows computers on the other. Every single one of these desks are up-down desks. And there's this moment of discovery when students accidentally press the button. You could see it hidden right underneath the desk. Oh, my desk just moved. What's going on with this? And once they discover it, it's the most used and loved feature of the room. They're able to press a button and stand and work or sit and work. It's not one table where everybody has to work at the same level. Students can get comfortable, stand and use their laptop, or stand and use a computer. And it provides a great space. We have a couple that do not have chairs in front of them for wheelchair access. It opens it up so students can just sit or go in front of the computer and use the computer and put it at the level that makes them comfortable. One thing that we also need to make sure of is we worked on wire management. Wire management is a big thing because students will often put their feet on the back of the wall and kind of work and kind of chill out. And so wire management was an important thing. So we put a lot of detail into that. Personal devices. And then on the side, on this bar, this stone kind of pillar, we have signs for all of the equipment, what it does. Students will walk in the room and often not know what the equipment does or what's available, especially the up-down desks because they're underneath. So we have signs all around the room that describe what's going on, and it's a scavenger hunt. Students go around the room and see what's new from year to year. Next slide. There are things that we couldn't change, however, and as you can see, this doesn't quite fit in. This is our printing station, and our mothership, UW-Seattle, manages all the printers. And unfortunately, we couldn't make our printing station look acceptable, and we had to keep what they gave us. And so sometimes things can't change when you're changing a lab, and it's okay. Things like printers are one of the major reasons people come into an open lab, and we just kind of had to accept that. Ultimately, we'd like to get a nicer table or nicer computers or touch screens, but for right now, having things that work that students utilize is more important than having things that don't work that they don't, or that do work that they don't utilize. And ultimately, we go through about 2 or 3 reams of paper every day. So it's pretty popular, even though it's paid for printing. Next one. I'll pass it all over to Anna.
Okay, thank you, Salem. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the thought that we put into this lab when we were designing it and trying to think of making it as inclusive as possible and thinking of accessibility as a foundational principle and not an afterthought. So we try to think very broadly and also narrowly about universal design principles and how we could apply them to our lab. So just as a little refresher, the Disability Act of 2005 defines universal design as design that it can be used by most people independently in a majority of situations without accommodations. And that's paraphrasing it. And then, for example, a computer lab with Windows and Mac computers, 2 collaboration stations, a large all-in-one screen that could provide options for students for them to choose what they wanted, but even go beyond that. That's just a little example. So principle number 1 of universal design is equitable use. It's a design that is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. As part of this, we install large aisles and flexible desktops to allow them to have equal access to and have, again, choices. And let's see, next one, flexibility in all things, which is design that accommodates a wide range of abilities or disabilities and preferences for our students. So, for example, wheels make the space expandable. You can raise and you can lower the individual desks. And we have different types of stations, the individual as well as the collaboration for 2 or more people to meet. Number 3, simple and intuitive. So when the design is simple and intuitive, it's easy to understand no matter the person's experience, knowledge, language skills, or even their concentration level. So, for example, students can choose if they rather use to use one of our Macs, or if they're more familiar with the Windows PC, to use the Windows PC, or bring their own device and use it in the lab, plug it in for power, and use the internet connectivity on the campus. Next principle is perceptible information. So the design needs to be easily understood by the user, no matter what the conditions of the ambient or the sensory abilities of the user. So this is just an example when what we try to not necessarily directly, but indirectly emulate. For example, when we design with universal design principles, everyone benefits. As an example, when we have a video or even this session, when the automatic captions are available for those people who would like to use it, which I'm one of them, I love using captions. Everyone benefits, and we always have a choice. And if we want to use it, it is available. Next principle is tolerance for error, and that includes computer or human. So the design needs to minimize issues and hazards and bad consequences from accidents or unintended actions. For example, we have a sign on screen for our lab. It is installed at eye level, but it is low enough for someone in a wheelchair so they can easily reach it. And the sign-in is very simple to use. It is a very simple Google form that allows people to easily go back or forward if they make a mistake, and then go back to the beginning if they need to. And there's validation built in to guide users. Another principle is low physical effort, so people can learn comfortably. Okay, the design can be used efficiently, comfortably, and with minimum fatigue. We have up and down desks. So if someone wants to do their work standing up, they can, or if they want to be sitting, they can as well. We have all of the Windows computers are monitor arms, so they can be moved and adjusted to fit the preference of the student or the person using it. And we have lots of space and clearance for people to move around. Size and space for approach and use. So appropriate size and space is provided, so people can reach, manipulate, and use, no matter what their body size, posture, or mobility. So I mentioned it in the last one, I'll mention here because there's a lot of times. All these principles are connected. We have tons of clearance between the computers at the entrances, which allow this space to be navigated fairly easy. Okay, and I'll pass it on to Sam.
Thank you much, Anna. So you may be wondering, how were we able to afford this? On a campus where all of our labs were dismantled, except for this one, how are we able to get funding for such an elaborate, accessible lab? And the first thing comes down to feedback. We did a lot of student surveys. anytime somebody would walk in there, there was signs everywhere to do a student survey and would ask about the software that they used, how they liked learning, about space. And things as minute as how do you like the lab, the light in the lab? What is the ambiance you like to work? Do you like the lab bright, or do you like the lab with all the lights dark so you can work in the dark? And going off of student feedback, even how minute it might be, really helped us create a lab where students really felt comfortable, and they felt like they had input. One of the major things that I hear a lot as a faculty member who teaches students and also as a staff member is that I pay all of these fees, I pay all of this money, and I don't see anything benefiting me. And with this lab, we really tried to show students that they were in control of this lab, because ultimately they are. So we would ask things about how they used the lab, what software was important to them, and a bunch of other questions constantly. We wouldn't just ask it 1 week, 1 quarter, and then be done with it. We kept it open. We would start new surveys. We would ask different questions. And students ultimately, this being the only campus lab other than the library, would start telling each other about all the cool changes that happened to the lab once we did the remodel. Thankfully, we also have student employees. Our student employees are paid for by departments. So we have a School of Arts who pays for our media employee. And we have a program in design who pays for our design employee. When we set up our tutoring, we specified that media and design would become accessible to all students who come in the lab, giving it a unique giving us a unique space for a student to learn things that they might not be able to learn, especially if they're in nursing or another program that doesn't focus on media design. Any student can come into this room and ask, how do I learn Photoshop? And they'll get one-on-one tutoring. And by incorporating that into our student worker positions, the schools were absolutely, if they're not being utilized by one of our students, feel free to have them help other students, making the space open for conversation and also student advancement and career building, which is one of the personal interests that I have a lot, helping students build their career. Personal observation. Sitting in a lab is not something that management does a lot. And going in there and sitting in the lab and seeing how people use the space really helps determine what's going wrong, what's going right, where are people looking confused, and not asking them directly, but just watching how people move in and out of the lab and asking the student workers how people are utilizing the lab really, really helps determine. And the key thing is all of it provides data. The major thing that funding entities want is data. So we had all these surveys, we had all this feedback, and then we had computer utilization monitoring software. Just quick way to say, it basically tracks how long the computers are being used for and what software is being used. We don't track student names, anything like that, just those two things. How long is a computer being used for during a session and what software is being used? We use a program called LabStats, and it's pretty popular. By using that software, we were able to give administration really solid data, showing them that students on average use the computers for about 3 hours. Students use Adobe CC, and that really helps propel funding because they know it's being utilized, and I don't have to explain it. I can just show the charts. The other great thing, and I'm not advertising one piece of software over another, but some of them have remote access. And during COVID, when it happened, when it first broke out and the campus closed, students still needed access to that same software. They still needed an Adobe subscription so they could use Adobe products. So finding multi-use software, especially that monitors stats and also allows students to remote connect, that saved us because students were able to connect to the lab even remotely because the campus was closed. Next slide. And I want to read out these awesome quotes that we got from some of the student surveys. Hannah?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. Whether, like Esteban said, wanted or unwanted, uh, the overall feedback was so positive from students. They found that, like from this one, it said, let's see, diverse. Did I jump on? There we go. So they're they're happy to have the OLL because it supplies them with the tools and resources to succeed academically. They're appreciating the preloaded software and tutoring services because we always have a tutor at the lab. And like right now, we don't have an in-person tutor because the campus and the lab are closed. The physical lab is closed, but they can make an appointment virtually. That also, they appreciated the convenient hardware. And then as Selim mentioned, one of the reasons that people use the lab is to print. So we have in their printer, scanners, the adjustable tables, and the headphones. And also how was a great place for collaboration. This other student shares that it is a diverse and friendly place open to all students. And as we mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, it's the only open lab that we have on campus. So they appreciate the offer of free software such as Photoshop or Premiere. So they get what they need to finish their projects without having to buy those expensive licenses. And on top of that, as the student says, they like it as a place to hang out because there's a group study station and a big monitor that they're allowed to use. The student mentions, and we had to cut it a little bit because it was quite long, but he was overall positive, mentions the welcoming environment where students can collaborate and how what's in there, the equipment that is there and the software is the stuff that they need for their courses. So it benefits all the students financially. They enjoy the open layout, the stand sit desk, the automatic door, which was an add-on much later after it was designed, but we were really happy to get. And then making this an accessible and inclusive place for all students. And this student says, he's one of our student employees. He said that he realized how important the Open Learning Lab is to students and faculty, and as many people has been benefited by the facilities that the lab provides. And how the different stations in the learning spaces give students and faculty the freedom to choose the best fitted learning area. And again, this is about choices. This is about providing with what they need so they can achieve their learning objectives. Gisela?
Thank you, Anna. So there comes the fun question, funding. And funding has always been an up-down thing. And as many of you know that spend money on campus, it can be very momentary, i.e. you could get a lot of funding and then it disappears a month later. Or it could be lingering, but have a very narrow use that you could only use, purchase certain things with the funding. And it's so narrow sometimes that it makes it really difficult. Here is our breakdown of our funding outlook. And here's how we determine what we were going to fund and how we were going to fund it. And as you can see, it's broken down to need and feedback. There are things in the room that we absolutely need. We needed an automated door. Students were having a hard time. We have these heavy wood doors and there was no buzzer. There was no automatic door in that room for a decade. Students were having a hard time getting in there. And when you see that, it breaks your heart because you realize that the campus is not providing a resource for the students that they absolutely need. So working with facilities and reaching out and showing them the statistics, again, it goes back to proving how people use the lab and how many people use the lab. It helps you get things funded like automatic doors, especially for a public lab. You need doors that anybody could open. And accessibility software. Working with your disability support resources department is a great way to learn about what accessibility software is needed. Unfortunately, accessibility software doesn't have a lot of training. You generally, if you're a student with the accessibility need, you have to reach out. In many of the places you reach out, they don't have the skills to train you on how to use the software. I'm a huge accessibility advocate. Personally, I use screen reading software and voice to text software. And part of my research for my master's in education, I looked at how students were getting support once they entered the university. And unfortunately, while many of them can get the software, they don't have training on how to use it, but neither does the staff, neither does the faculty. So accessibility software becomes a really difficult thing for students to learn. And part of our goal was to make sure that we had people available in the lab to help them learn these new ways of reading an essay, turning it into an MP3 from a PDF, or using voice to text, and having enough space between students to make sure that they could talk without feeling uncomfortable into a computer so it writes down the words that they're saying. So need can be focused through disability services and also facilities and just reaching out. Technology purchases. Here's a difficult one. Everybody thinks everybody else's department should be paying for these resources. And one of the things with a open lab is everybody's using it, so there is not one person who's dedicating all the money. And that makes it hard because you can't say, hey, your students used it X amount of time, now you have to donate. Thankfully, the computers that we got in there and the software that we get in there, we get through something called student technology fees. And most campuses have this $40 that they charge each student each quarter, and they accumulate that. And then they open to staff a request-based program, so staff can put in requests for equipment, and then the students vote on whether they provide the equipment or not. And thankfully, we've had a lot of luck through STF. One thing that we do is make sure that we're not purchasing equipment that's not needed and equipment that's not going to be utilized. Many times we have aspirations that nobody really wants to utilize the software that we have these aspirations for. So we're really careful on what we request. We make sure we have software that students need and students want, and we could provide factual responses to the use of that software. When you purchase a bunch of software that people don't want, your computers become bloated, and these groups and organizations have less tendency to want to support you in future requests because they see that the software is not being used. So we're very, very careful. Another thing we put in requests for is headphones. And we buy the cheapest headphones because we know they're disposable. And we tell them that in our request. But we also put the headphones in a way that students can use their own headphones and use better equipment if needed. Things that are expendable, always purchase the cheapest because students will probably bring the best for themselves if they want the best. Furniture is a complicated one, and generally that's funded through university renovation programs. We thankfully wrote our request for our student technology fee, and they only pay for technology. So it has to have a computer, it has to have electronics in it. And we had to think, how could we get furniture from something that only pays for equipment? And technology exists in desks nowadays. Those group stations have monitors in them, and that's technology. And what we would do is bundle the computer monitors with the desk and get quotes for the bundled stations. And students who vote on these technology fees love that idea because they see it as all one unit. They're not thinking you're requesting a desk or a chair. They see you requesting a unit that has technology incorporated into it. And by doing that and creating a quote, we were able to get $500,000 of funding to renovate that lab for accessibility, simply by bundling the furniture with the electronics. And then room improvement. And this is the hardest thing to get funding for. Paint, wire managements and like wire strips, lighting and wall hangings. It costs $50 on our campus to get a poster hung. $50. Sometimes you have to find a nail and and put it in the wall, and other times you go through the facilities. And but for painting and wire management, sometimes your department has to put in a little bit of money. And if you're doing huge renovations and getting money from other things like STF or facilities, it's really good to show as a department you're willing to invest in the space as well. And painting a wall or hanging a poster or making sure all the wires are managed correctly. And that can show you care as a department about the lab as well. And it's not just students or the university funding the space. Next. And so we talked about all three of these, four of these different funding sources. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, as a staff member or as a faculty or somebody who utilizes a lab or has students that utilizes the lab, putting time on committees, putting time on room redevelopment plans, new building openings, showing yourself and being out there and advocating for this space can be the most rewarding thing for the students, because they know that somebody's there looking out for them and advocating for that space for them. And not annoyingly, but bringing up the space when it's needed and talking about the space and how the space is developed and how many students. The stats and the surveys really give you the material to work with other people around campus to show them how valuable a space is, especially when there's a need for classrooms. Next slide. And I'll pass it over to Anna to finish this up.
Okay, and what is next? Try and try again. If you don't get the funding, if you don't get everything you need, continue trying. Communicate with your campus, because it makes a big difference, because by communicating, you spread awareness to the students that this is available, so they know that if it comes to a vote or a recommendation, they can ask for it, or they can, is there for them to use. Also, awareness to advisors, staff, and older staff members that work with students, faculty, so they know that this is available, and they can also be supporters of this type of area on campus to support the students. And all of this helps us gather funding support when we do this. And here's our contact information, my and Salem's email. So if you're welcome to contact us at any time. And even if you ever want to be, if you ever happen to be in Bothell, once we're open and would like it to, we'd love to give you a tour.
Thank you so much, everybody. And we'd like to take questions. And I have chat open if you feel more comfortable typing in chat. Was the program, what was the program we used to collect data? So we used, and I'm not advocating for this program specifically, it seemed to work for us. We use a program called LabStats, and I will put a link in chat for it. We collect the minimal amount of data because we want students to have their privacy. LabStats can go above and beyond and tell you what websites students visit and all that other stuff. For us, that's too much. We simply wanted to use to get data based on computer utilization. So they allow you to turn off features and anonymize and all that other stuff. And the main thing we wanted was anonymous data. And here is the link to that program. And if you have questions about it, you know, feel free to contact us. The one thing I have to, let me make sure I'm sending it to everybody here. The one thing I have to say about it is it saved us during COVID because it also allows remote computer connection on the Windows side. So we were able to turn all of our physical stations into remote stations using Microsoft virtual desktop. So it was quite awesome for that. And that really did help us during when the pandemic happened. Any other questions? Are there specific vendors you have feel have a wired variety, better support, and accessibility products? That's a great question. One of the things that we did is we actually went to one of the vendors. We have a dedicated vendor for Washington, our university. We went to their showroom. They have a showroom in Seattle, and we looked at what they had. We did a lot of research online. and a lot of research other places, they just happen to have the perfect um, set of equipment for us. We use Steelcase as our contracted vendor. Now, I have seen things out there that are really cool that I would, think about investing in terms of new furniture from other companies. But particularly for our lab, we use Steelcase because there were discounts as well. And sometimes those discounts can overshadow the cool features of some furniture over the other. The main thing was accessibility. An up-down desk in a flat surface, focusing on the minimal gives student the most options to utilize that space how they see fit. I mean, we could have got a bunch of cool stuff attached to the desk, but just finding a good priced up-down accessibility desk was our key goal in this project, and having open space was the other key goal. Now, there are other features that, in terms of chairs, we weren't able to get funding for chairs. Those are the same chairs that have been in there a decade. I couldn't find chairs that had computers built into them, nor do I think anybody would pay for computer chairs with computers built into them. So sometimes you have to use what you have and use what's around campus. But for the sake of this lab, we just had a really good vendor that was willing to work with us. And I'm not advocating for them or another vendor. I just, work with your facilities and talk to them about what vendors they use and look at their catalogs. The catalogs can give you great ideas. And sometimes going to the showroom can also help. What kind of accessibility programs do you have on campus? So here's one of let me admit Rob here. Here's one of the things that is often hard to get funding for is accessibility programs, especially if there's not a dedicated need. Generally, if a student has an accessibility need, they put in a request with the disability support services department, and then they get the software. Generally, there's a few licenses that they have to help a student year after year. Having computers with software pre-installed on it generally isn't funded that often. One thing we're working on now is to build a accessibility station. And I put accessibility in quotes. Nobody likes being singled out and saying, oh, they're, and having this big, huge identifiable accessibility station, because nobody likes to be pointed out or, and so one of the things we're doing this year is we're working with the disability services to create a station, a couple computers with software built in. Generally, we have a tendency not to request a bunch of software because we don't know how people are going to use it. Personally, I use accessibility software. If somebody said, here's your accessibility software to me, I'm going to say, no, I don't want this. I want the one I use because that's the one I was trained in. And especially because students don't get training in the software often cases, it makes it really hard to learn this new software. And so for a lot of the uniqueness of accessibility software, we want to see what students are using. It changes from year to year. Right now, we use Mac computers, and we use the, if you go in accessibility on Mac computers, they have a great text-to-speech, and they also have a really good voice-to-text program built into the Mac computers. We advocate that, and the student tutors will show students how to use that. It's fantastic. It's what I personally use. There is another program that I like a lot. It's called Natural Reader, and that will take any PDF document, OCR it, which means optical character recognition, makes it into a readable document, and it will read it out to you in different voices. That's a really good one, and I can post a link to that one as well. Microsoft also has some really good accessibility software built in. The fact that we stay with the base software gives us a foundation in which we can teach students and provide accessibility resources. If they have needs, however, working with the DRS office and ultimately, as we're building this year, working with students to see what they're using, that's how we determine what's being used year after year. I have to say, technology keeps getting easier and easier to use for screen reading and OCR and text to speech. And it would be very disingenuous of us to just buy something and say we're done. It used to take minutes to transcribe seconds of video. Now you can just drop it into Panopto or YouTube or Zoom and it will do it automatically for you. So as this stuff progresses, we try to stay on the leading edge and know what students are using and know it's valuable to focus students in the right direction and help our Disability Resource Office make right decisions. Do other lab units on campus use Steelcase? Anna, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, they're not the only furniture vendor, but it is one that is quite active on all 3 of our campuses. And our units do usually have a mix. So Steelcase where it applies, or we use all the vendors in addition to Steelcase to complement, because granted their furniture tends to be expensive. But another thing is that they do offer grants, yearly grants that institutions can apply for that can help pay for a lot of the cost. So yes, it is used in all of our, we have our Seattle campus, our main campus, our Bethel campus is where we are, and our Tacoma campus. And then going back to the accessibility software real quick, future plans, we do plan to install some free software, like for example, a screen reader is called NVDA on all of our Windows computers, and install the free add-in for Natural Read It as Salem shared. And then we're hoping in the future we can add something like Zoom text if we happen to have the funding, although the built-in does a pretty good job in both Macs and Windows to cover that.
Thank you all for the wonderful questions. We have some time for more if anybody else had any more questions.
Oh, there's one more. How did we fund the Steelcase furniture we purchased for the lab? So
go ahead.
Yeah,
Anna.
so so what we did, we applied for a student technical tech fee grant, and we got it. How much was the total amount that we were awarded?
It was $400,000, and we did that by finding technology-based systems that included the furniture. So generally, they would only pay for computers and other technology. But when you bundled it together and say had a desk with monitors and other stuff built in, that allowed us to use that funding simply by getting a little bit creative in bundling the computers or the monitors with the furniture or the technology of the up-down desks inside the furniture. So we kind of changed it a little bit to meet the needs of what we were applying for. And that's often how you have to work within the system, is find things that are bundled together, because then they see it as a whole unit and not as separate things.
Yeah. And it looks like we're a little past time, so.
Well, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And again, if you have any questions about lab design or accessibility, feel free to reach out to Anna and I, and we thank you for coming.
Thanks, Susan, for moderating our session. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so
No
much.
problem.
Susan.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed the Baby Yoda.
Yes, we sure did.
Oh, we enjoyed the Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good one. I'll see you around the rest of the conference.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.